Well, good morning, gang, and welcome again to Morning Coffee and a Thought, brought to you by Wings of Faith Ministries here in Sarnia. This morning, I want to kind of tackle the whole idea of self-promotion or self-aggrandizing. We see a lot of it in the world we live in today. And of course, we have so many platforms out there in which one can promote themselves. But when we look at the Bible, this could be, in many cases, a recipe for disaster. And that's the thought that we want to look at today. First of all, before we get to our thought, I want to remind you that Morning Coffee and a Thought can be viewed on our YouTube channel every Friday beginning at 1 p.m. And if you like these thoughts, we would ask you to like or subscribe to our YouTube channel. Also, we're on Facebook every Sunday morning beginning at 8 a.m. Also, if you want information, if you have a prayer request, or you want to make a donation to this ministry, you can do all of that at wingsoffaithministries.ca. So now let's get back to our thought. There are a number of biblical books that cover Jewish existence during the time of the Persian Empire. We have narrative books like Ezra and Nehemiah. We have prophetic books like Zechariah and Haggai. But one of the most interesting ones to me, and a very controversial writing, is the book of Esther. For centuries, scholars, both Jewish and Christian, have debated whether this book was fiction, historical fiction, just what genre does it fit into. And yet, it is a fascinating tale that we can use for our thought this morning. There are four main characters in this writing: the king, Xerxes, the queen, who will be Esther, her cousin, Mordecai, and the villain in our story, Haman. All these characters are flawed in some way. And one of the most controversial things about the writing of Esther is there's never a mention of God in the writing. And yet throughout the writing, we can see the work of God behind the scenes. So let's look at this story and how it pertains to self-promotion. The story begins with King Xerxes deposing his queen Vashti for her disobedience to his commands. After the queen has been deposed, he decides he needs a replacement. And so a search goes out throughout the Persian Empire to find a replacement for Queen Vashti. When the search is concluded, a young Jewish girl named Esther, or Hadassah, has been chosen to be the replacement for Vashti. Now, Esther never reveals her nationality. That's kept secret because her cousin, Mordecai, wants her to keep it to herself. And so she is made queen. Now, while that plot is going on, the villain is also introduced into the story. A man named Haman, a man who appears to be full of himself, has just been promoted to a high place in the kingdom. So we have these two plots. We have the Jewish girl, Esther, who's just been made queen, and we have Haman, a sort of self-important man who has been promoted to a high position in the Persian Empire. Now, Haman, when he's promoted, feels that people need to pay homage to him. So he asks the king to make an edict saying that whenever he passes by, be it walking or riding a horse or whatever, that people are to bow and pay homage to him because of his position. But as the story goes on, we find out that Mordecai, Esther's cousin, will not comply with the edict. He refuses to bow down to Haman. And of course, with the type of person Haman is, he's so full of himself, this aggravates him. So Haman decides that he needs to take matters in his own hands. He goes to the king and tells him that Mordecai will not comply with the edict. But not only should the king execute Mordecai, but the king should execute Mordecai's people, the Jews. So Haman arranges for an edict to be made law that by the end of the year, the Jews living in the Persian Empire will be exterminated because of Mordecai's behavior. Now, while that's going on, there's a little sidebar. Mordecai has been watching over his cousin Esther. He has brought her up. He's excited about the fact she's queen, but he always, like a father, is looking out for her. And he notices while he's hanging around the palace that there's an assassination plot looming for King Xerxes. He reports the plot to his cousin Esther, who in fact reports it to her husband Xerxes. The plot is found out to be true, that Mordecai's claims are valid, but nothing is really done for Mordecai. He's kind of just forgotten about the whole situation. One night, Xerxes can't sleep. Something's bothering him. And so he gets up in the middle of the night. He summons some of his officials and asks them if they would go through the records of things that have occurred. He feels in his mind he's missing something. They find out about this whole assassination plot and the fact that Mordecai turned in the assassins. And so King Xerxes decides that Mordecai should be honored, although it's late, but still he wants to honor him. So a few days later, Haman, our villain, decides to visit the king. As he goes into the throne room, King Xerxes says to him, I want to honor somebody. And Haman, I want you to tell me how I should honor him. Haman thinks, of course, that it's him that needs to be honored. And so he gives the king the whole plan on how this man should be honored. A beautiful robe, a new ring, riding on a horse with someone leading it. The king then tells Haman that that's exactly what he wants him to do for his enemy, Mordecai. Well, naturally, Haman is humiliated. And this will be the beginning of the end for this man who was so much into self-promotion. After Haman is humiliated, having to lead this parade for Mordecai, he finds out that he's been invited to a banquet put on by Queen Esther. Haman attends the banquet, and this will be his downfall. The king says to Queen Esther, I'm here at the banquet and Haman's here with me. What is it you would like us to do for you? It is then that Queen Esther reveals the plot of Haman, that Haman wants to kill the Jewish people, of which she is a part of. It is then that the king is totally enraged, and then will hang Haman on the very gallows that Haman had planned to hang Mordecai. A recipe for disaster. Jesus, hundreds of years later, will bring up the same situation about self-promotion. Jesus will say, when you're invited to a feast or a banquet, whatever you do, don't take the place of honor when you walk in. Now, when Jewish people had banquets, the seating arrangement would kind of be in a U form, with the major guests at the front of the U, and of course the lesser important guests at the back. So Jesus was telling them, when you enter the banquet hall, sit in the lowest place. Why? Why would you do that? Jesus said to his guests that day, if you put yourself in an important place, someone more important than you might have been invited. And then you'll be asked to leave your seat and sit in a faraway seat, and in front of everyone, you'll be humiliated. But if you take the lowest seat in the banquet hall, and you are really that important, then when the guests all come in and the host comes in, he's going to ask you to move up to a more important place, and you will be honored. In other words, those who are prideful will be humbled, while those who come in humbly can be exalted. Haman learned a very hard lesson that cost him and his family their lives because of his own self-importance. We live in a world today of self-promotion, and we as believers always have to remember that it's our gifts that Christ has given us that will make a way for us, not our own self-importance. It's too easy when you live in a world where everybody wants to grandize everything, to get caught up in that, to get swept up in it. But we as believers have to walk humbly before our God and our fellow man. Let your gifts and callings of God make the way for you. Don't try to push your way in. It's a recipe for disaster, as Haman found out in the book of Esther. Listen, that is the thought for this morning. You take care, enjoy your coffees, and we'll see you again next week.